my name is Cassie and I am the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and in today's video we're doing another free pattern review where I review 12 different patterns in this video. And for today's video I tried to pick as many market preppable looking patterns that I could find, so that's why we have a little bit more than 10 today. I also had a follower suggest one of their own patterns that are really good for this time of year as well, so I added on a couple patterns last minute to this video, but I'm really excited to show you all of today's patterns. But first off, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Starting off with, I have implemented a color grading system for the graphics that appear on screen. So if you see certain colors, you'll see green, you'll see like a yellow orangish color, and then you'll see like a pinkish red color. And the meaning of all of those things is in the description box below the video in case you're wondering about what those different colors mean. I try to make it as straightforward as possible. Green meaning good, red/pink meaning bad, and then orange is kind of like in the middle. But if you're curious about what the meaning of those colors are, look in the description box if you're confused. Next up, I want to go over my rating criteria. Number one is, would I use the pattern again? This is about if I overall enjoy working on the pattern, if I would use it again in the future based on if it's a good pattern to me or if I just didn't really enjoy making it as much. In addition to that, it's also really important to consider how much time it takes me to make the finished product versus the finished product, like that time equals value proposition type thing. If the value that I'm getting out of the finished product is worth all of the time it takes to make the finished product. Number two is, can I understand the pattern easily? This is about if the pattern is easy for all skill levels to complete without encountering any problems or confusion. More complicated steps should have detailed and thorough instructions, diagrams, and plenty of work in progress photos for them to rate more highly on my scale. And then finally, number three is, do I like the finished product? This is about if the finished product is something for me personally that I think people would like and want to purchase from me from markets, because that's the main reason I make plushies. But then it also is about if it's a case of expectations versus reality, where the finished pattern photos don't look a lot like my finished product. That's what it means by expectations versus reality. But anyway, now that we've got all of our housekeeping things ready and taken care of, let's go ahead and start looking at the patterns. The first pattern I rated for this video is the Chubby Heelers pattern by Maddie Crafts. This is a really quick and cute market make. I really enjoyed making it. This is the medium size that I made, and actually in the pattern there's a variation for like a bluey dog and then the orange dog. I've actually never watched Bluey, so I don't actually know the name of this dog, but definitely comment down below if you do know the name so that people know who I'm talking about. But we've got the two different dogs here, and then like I was trying to say before I interrupted myself, I only made one of each of them for the first plushie set that I made, and then the rest of them I only made one of each. But I tried to switch up the colors a little bit. So here is the smallest size in worsted weight yarn, and this would be really great to make into a keychain, I think. So that is something to consider if you're working in worsted weight yarn. And then the largest size that I made, I used Bernat sized yarns, and this one I ended up going with some different colors just to make it look like a real dog and not just like a cartoon character. So there are different sizes here. The little one is kind of hidden away. I can't really hold them up all at the same time. But anyway, let me go ahead and get into my notes about this pattern now. First up, I really enjoyed that you could make all sorts of different dogs. You don't have to just follow the pattern to make bluey characters. You can also, as you can see here, make just like any type of dog that you want. This one kind of looks more like a husky or something like that based on the colors I chose, but they come out really cute and I was surprised about that, so that was really awesome. The first thing that I noticed about the pattern was just some vague instructions, specifically that it's missing some work in progress photos. There are some photos on the instructions, but it's just of the finished product of each of the different plushie variations on both pages, and you don't have any work in progress photos of different steps that might be more complicated, like the ears. then I just didn't like what the overall appearance looked like. It wasn't turning out as cute as it was in the creator's photos. If you followed the pattern as written, when you turn your blue heeler around, you would see the front of the ear poking through. So you would have that color change of the inner ear facing both ways. I didn't really like how that was turning out, and I didn't like the extra steps that I took to make it so that you wouldn't see that inner ear color on the rest of my plushies. So you'll see on the rest of these, I just didn't even bother with the inner ear color because I didn't want to create extra work for myself. So that's why the rest of these just have a solid ear color instead of that dual color ear. What I did with the first bluey dog that I worked up is I just duplicated the same pattern but with just the main color that we're using so that you wouldn't see the inner ear color on the back side, and then I just single crocheted those two pieces together and then sewed them onto the head and body itself. So if you want to still have that inner ear color and you just want to make it look a little bit nicer and not have that inner ear color poking through the backside, that's something that you could really easily do, but it does add some time to the overall finished product. Another thing that I noticed about the appearance was just that the size of the yarn really makes a difference in what this looks like. As you can see here, this first bluey dog and also the orange one, I forgot where it was for a second, they don't really look much like the photos of the finished product on the author's page. But when I was working with Bernat, I did notice it looked a little bit more similar to those dogs. So size of yarn really makes a difference in the appearance with this one, unfortunately. A lot of the times I do not see that working with different patterns and different yarn sizes, but it's just a matter of the overall tension of the yarn, I suppose, working with a smaller hook and getting some more coning maybe. So maybe if I was to size down with this like premier sized yarn, it would have made a difference and it would have looked a little bit more like the pattern photos. But overall, aside from me not really liking what the finished product looks like and how it looks a little bit different compared to the pattern designer's photos, as well as just like missing some work in progress photos, those are some pretty minor notes, and I would have to rate this pattern 4 out of 5. It was really nicely written. I didn't have any issues with the instructions with like errors or anything like that. And definitely, like I was saying, you don't need to do this. You could just choose not to color change and then you wouldn't have that inner ear issue that I was talking about. So yeah, those are definitely up to preference. I'm sure that some people would probably rate lower than me, but just because a lot of the things that I ran into were preference issues and not really like technical issues, I would rate this 4 out of 5. This next pattern is a pattern by Amigurumi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a little bit complicated spelling there, but we've got the mini Totoro keychain, and this is the smallest size I worked it up in using worsted weight yarn. Really cute. Not quite keychain size in my opinion. I'm not sure what yarn weight they were using in their instructions, but this is the smallest I had available, and it's definitely not keychain size, so that was a little interesting. Here's the middle size using Premier Parfait Chunky or similar yarn weight. Definitely much bigger in overall size. And then in the Bernat size, we have this guy here. So it looks like they're increasing at about half or about a third of size, depending on what yarn size you use, but definitely none of them are like keychain size. So that was definitely surprising to me. Maybe like more bag charm size. I know that the size of keychains and like bag charms keeps getting bigger, like with all the Labubus and all the other things that are out there. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider when making this up. I thought this pattern was really quick and easy to make, really cute pattern, pretty low sew. The only things that you're really sewing on are actually just the ear here. I was about to say that you're also sewing on the ears, but from what I remember, I believe you just crochet them directly into the head, so that is also a plus. Something that I always struggle with when making a plushie like this, where you have to embroider the chest here and you have like a very limited space, is just getting those little arrow details in the right spot so that they're spaced adequately and they're also not like looking slightly different with each one. So for example, on the bottom row, the middle one here looks a little bit different, like an angle. So that's definitely a skill issue and not a pattern issue. The first thing I noticed about the pattern was that the instructions were out of order. The first page of the instructions is actually meant to be the second page of it. So the first page that you encounter with instructions starts with, I believe, round 15, and then the first page that is actually meant to be the first page goes from rounds 1 to 14. So at first I was a little worried that I was missing a page of the instructions, but it turns out they were just out of order when they were posted. Next up, I noticed some vague instructions, starting with, I wish there was a photo of the eye placement near the instructions for it, just so that I wouldn't have to flip back and forth between pages to place the eyes correctly. And then I also noticed some vague instructions for the ear instructions. Starting off, it doesn't tell you where to attach your yarn in relation to the eyes or arm bobbles, but there is a photo there, which is helpful. It just would also be helpful to see some written instructions there that accompany it. I also think it's important that the ears face the same way, so you don't have one facing the back with the right side stitches facing the wrong way and then the other one facing the opposite way. The instructions are the same for both ears, so if you followed them exactly, one of your ears is going to be facing the wrong way. So what I did to make sure they were both facing the right way is I did the instructions in reverse and attached my yarn between rounds 3 and 4. And then I slip stitched between rounds 4 and 5 when I finished the work into the chain. The last thing that I noticed was that there is a possible error in the leaf instructions. It tells you to chain 5, and then starting in the second chain from the hook, you're supposed to make 1 slip stitch, 1 single crochet, 1 half double crochet, 1 double crochet, and then 5 double crochet into the last loop. And that's not all of the instructions written there, but just that first part of this instruction, you can't fit all of those things unless you chain 6. There are 4 workable chains and 5 stitches, so I ended up just skipping the first 1 double crochet step each time I made the leaf. But overall, I think this is a really cute pattern. This is one of the quickest versions of Totoro that I've seen out there, as a free pattern at least, so it's definitely one to keep in the back of my mind when I'm thinking about prepping for markets. I know that Totoro is a really popular character and a lot of people get excited when they see him, so it's definitely one that I will be prepping for future markets. So with that being said, I would give this pattern 4 stars out of 5. The next pattern I reviewed for this video is the Pocket Axolotl. Look at how tiny this guy is. This is a pattern by Sours Cud, I believe. And it comes out so tiny just using Premier Parfait Chunky. So imagine my surprise when I made it using worsted weight yarn and it came out to like this tiny little axolotl. Great for a keychain. I was thinking about maybe hanging him like this on a keychain instead of like this. Just because I think he's really cute. He's really tiny. I always get such a jolt of joy when I make something in worsted weight yarn and just realize how tiny you can make it. So that was really cool. And then our largest size here, I worked with Premier Gumdrop Chenille, so a little bit bigger here than the Premier Parfait, but still not bad. It's a great market prep make, obviously, just because of how quick you can make these up and how small they are. So you can make a bunch of them and not really have to spend a ton of time. And I imagine they'll be pretty popular at markets as well, just because of how popular axolotls are in general. I really liked this pattern and I just really enjoy what it looks like. I will say my first impressions of the pattern designer's photos, I thought the body was going to be a little bit longer just based on the photo. She has it angled like this, so it looks like the body is a little bit extended, but when you turn it on its side, it just looks a little bit shorter. So maybe in the future when I make these, I might add a little bit more rounds in between the front and back legs. I think there's only 1 round between the front and back legs with this how it is, but I think it would look a little bit nicer if there was just 1 more row in between and 1 more round in between. I think it'll make it look a little less like squished. I noticed some vague instructions in this pattern starting in round 4. It's not immediately obvious that the slip stitch in the front loops only after the 2 single crochet down the chain is in the same stitch that we single crochet into originally. It's not really obvious there. I have the same note about round 5 and 6 as well, where you're doing basically the same thing there, and it's just not obvious that you're supposed to be slip stitching in the front loops only. I also think it's important to add a note somewhere in the pattern that tells us in rounds 5, 6, and onward, wherever there is a open back loop only from the round before where we made front loop only stitches, that you should be crocheting into those back loop only stitches instead of the stitches we created into the front loop only in those areas. I don't think that's immediately obvious to beginners, so it's really important to tell people that somewhere in the pattern. I also think it's important to indicate what we're creating when we're chaining so that we know how to position the safety eyes when we place them. I actually waited to place my safety eyes until well after round 6 so that I had both of the front arms done. That way I could get the placement right because I wasn't sure what I was creating. And that's just because you're not only chaining for the legs, you're also chaining for each of these little gills on the side of the axolotl's face, or maybe they're not called gills. Let me know in the comment section if you know what they're called. The little face frills. That's like the first thing you're chaining because you start from the face and you work back to the tail. And, you know, like when I was making those, it wasn't immediately obvious to me that that's what those were. And so it made it a little bit difficult to figure out where the eyes should go. Overall, this pattern is really cute, and I definitely see myself getting it in the future and using it to make more axolotls for market. So I would have to rate this one 4 out of 5 as well. Another great market make. The next pattern I worked on for this video is the Love Kitty Paw. This is a cute little keychain type deal where it's a little animal paw print, so it's really cute. You can also reverse the pad part, like the biggest pad, to be upside down, which I actually did for the rest of these just because it fit on there a little bit better, but it's heart shaped, so you can have it face either way, and I think that's really cute. There's a chain, and you can loop it through the chain like this to hang it on anything that you want, so I think that is really cool. Here is the jumbo sized one. Really crazy size difference there. I can't imagine people wanting this for a keychain. I think it's kind of funny. I almost wish that it's like a little bag and it had like a clasp at the top because I think it would make like a really cute little coin purse. And then for the final one here, of course, we had it in worsted weight yarn, and on the side it almost looks like an ice cream sandwich or a macaroon or something. It's really cute, but this is probably the size that I would be making it if I were to be prepping these for markets, but I'm not sure that I would, just because this is a little bit longer of a make in terms of the overall value that I see it being sold as at a market. So it's not the best time investment for me. I thought this pattern was really beautiful, really detailed instructions. My only complaint is just that I wish the paw pad in the center was just a color change in the round itself, because I think that way it would make this less time investment. You're not going to get like this 3D effect that is really cool and nice to see, but I also think that it would just take a lot less time and it would be more market preppable than it currently is. So I would rate this pattern 4.5 stars out of 5. The next pattern that I crocheted for this video is one by a creator that I've created one of their patterns very recently, and I remember really liking it, and actually I think all of those little plushies that I made last time that I'm referring to have all sold at market, so that's really cool. This is a pattern by Dr. Choco Crochet. It's Tina the Tiny Dragon, and it's a keychain or swinging dragon. It's really cute. He's got this little basket. I will say he is really hard to balance in the basket itself. She includes some instructions about how to like position it so that it's less likely to fall out, but I do see that it's just a little precarious getting this little dragon to balance in there. So the way that you're supposed to get it to balance is you put the string of the swing in front of the dragon's ears and in front of his wings, and then that way he doesn't topple over, as you were just seeing before this clip. So here is the first one in the medium weight yarn. The dragon comes out of the swing, so you can have it either like this and just decide not to make the swing, or you can make the swing and have even like a mix and match station where you can match your dragon with the different swings that you have available to sell if you want to do that at your markets, but really cute. So here's the medium size, and then of course we've got this smallest one. I have noticed that the smallest one does balance a little bit better, and I think it's just because there's less room to stuff in it, so it's not as top heavy as the other ones, but really cute, really tiny little dragon. Could be keychain size if you really wanted it to. You can also make it so that it's like a little car hanger for your car. It's not like too big that it's going to obstruct your view. And then the largest size is this one here. I actually am torn between what size I like the most and that I think that I would prep for markets. It's definitely between the largest and medium size, but overall I think this one is probably my favorite just because I love getting the opportunity to use these really beautiful safety eyes that have like this rainbow glitter in them with the different color pupils as well. My only note about the pattern is that it was a little bit difficult to see the note in the wings section before you start making it that tells you that TW means turn backwards and start in the second chain / stitch from your work. This became an issue for me once I got to round 4 of the wings because I wasn't sure how to work 4 single crochets in that row because the previous row was only 3 single crochets. But it turns out when you write TW in this pattern, it just means that you're supposed to work into the second stitch or chain from your hook, and that's where I was getting a little bit confused. But once I read that little note there, it cleared it all up for me. It was just not immediately obvious. So with that being the only thing that I noticed about that pattern, and it's just something that can be really easily overlooked, but definitely something that is also an added bonus to the pattern, is that that was like thought about when writing it and mentioned as a note in the pattern. I would rate this pattern 5 stars out of 5. It's really quick and easy to make, makes these adorable little dragons, and I'm sure they will be a hit at markets. The next pattern I worked up for this video is Donnie the Duck by Koala's Crochet. Here he is. Obviously, he's a little Donald Duck from Disney, really cute guy. I will say I was a little bit unpleasantly surprised about this pattern because I was expecting it to be lower sew overall, but it turns out you have to sew nearly every piece on. I think the only thing that wasn't something that had to be sewn on was the beak you crochet directly into the head. But anyway, this is the medium size, and then we have the smallest size Donnie the Duck, really tiny, teeny little guy, really cute. And then the largest one is this one right here, a little bit darker beak color, but overall same kind of thing, really cute. This one I don't think is as obvious that it's supposed to be Donald the Duck just because that beak color and the feet color just being a little bit different than you typically see him. So the first thing that I noticed was vague instructions. Starting off with the instructions to create the beak aren't very specific. There's pictures of where to insert your hook, but it's before the eyes are placed. And my confusion comes from the face, and it says in that area centered below the eyes, but I think we're meant to insert our hook centered below the right facing eye and then work towards the left facing eye to create the beak. This set of instructions is also missing an instruction to slip stitch back into the face after creating the chain too. And that's really important because if you don't do that step, the side of the beak would not be attached securely. Another vague instruction I noticed was that there was a note after the body section that was confusing because it just says, if you're using a thinner yarn, you may need to do 2 rounds instead of 3, but it doesn't refer to what those rounds are that it's referring to, but I suspect it's referring to rounds 4 through 6 because that's the only area that you're doing 3 rounds in a row. Then finally, I noticed that this could also be lower sew. I think that the arms could be crocheted directly into the body in the last round before it's sewn shut, just by crocheting them into the body itself, doing those arms before the body and then crocheting them in. And then in addition to that, I also think that the feet could just be bobble stitches done in the body section That way you don't have to worry about sewing them onto the body later. So with that being said, I would have to rate this one a little bit lower just because it's not as market preppable as the other patterns that I've shown you guys. While this one has lots of smaller pieces to sew on, sewing can definitely take a lot more time than you're typically used to when you're doing like market prep makes that take lower amounts of time. And I can see people not wanting to make this one as much as well, just because of like some possible copyright issues, running into somebody who maybe reports you and needs to get like copyright infringement things done because you're selling like Donald Ducks. But anyway, I would have to rate this pattern 3.5 stars out of 5. I still think he's really cute, and the pattern was surprisingly well written in terms of like having lots of work in progress photos, being pretty clear in most sections, but there were still some areas in the pattern that were just a little bit vaguer than they should be, and that is why I would rate it that way. Next pattern that I reviewed for this video is a pattern by Lex in Stitches, and it's a pattern called Sweetheart the Bunny. And this is probably the pattern that took the longest out of all of the patterns in this video at just under an hour, but it came out so cute, guys. So here is the first one. This cute little bunny. I love the face shaping. It's a really unique shape that you don't really see with a lot of patterns. And the way that it's constructed is really unique, and I haven't seen anybody use these techniques before, so that was really cool as well. So anyway, this is the medium-sized one, and then we've got this large one, really cute. Obviously, face shape is a little bit different, and that's just how it goes when you use different yarn sizes and like different hook combinations sometimes. Definitely a lot more coning, and yeah, it definitely looks like a cone head compared to this medium-sized one, but still really cute. I still really like that head shape a lot. And then finally we have the smallest one, where this one is kind of giving panda a little bit just because of the colors that I chose, but still really cute. Such a cute little bunny. All of these bunnies are so adorable, but let's go ahead and get into the notes and things that I noticed about this pattern. So I noticed some vague instructions in this pattern, starting off with in the head section, it doesn't tell you what color you're supposed to start in. So it was like a little bit of flipping through the pages to make sure that I got the colors right to start. Another thing I noticed regarding color is just that the color changes in the body aren't noted. You have like the spot for the face, that's noted, but for replicating the color changes that the pattern designer has shown us in the cover photo, there is no notes or any sort of indication in the pattern about where to make those color changes. So that was a little bit sad to run into. So I had to improvise a little to make sure that I was getting those color changes right. And then the final vague instruction that I noticed was that when you make a spike bobble stitch, which that's something I have never heard of before, but the instructions don't tell you if you're supposed to skip the stitch you normally would have crocheted into, or if you're just supposed to crochet into that stitch anyway. And the reason I bring that up is just because I've never done a spike bobble stitch before. I'm sure other people probably haven't made one either if I haven't, but I could be wrong. Maybe that's becoming more common. But it was definitely really confusing, and every time I got to that round, in every single bunny actually, I was running into the issue where I was either running out of stitches before the end of the row, or I had too many stitches at the end of the row. And that's just because I didn't know where to place stitches to make that stitch count correct. But overall, I think this is a really cute little bunny, really adorable pattern, really thoroughly written instructions. A lot of love and thought went into making this pattern. Obviously, you can see by all of the different work in progress photos, the different diagrams, annotations on the photos, as well as the thoroughly written notes everywhere, that this pattern is a really good one, and this is one that you should probably reference if you're looking at making your own patterns in the future. It's a really great example of all of the different things that are really important when you're writing your own pattern. So with all of that being said, I would rate this pattern 4 stars out of 5. So now we've come to the first pattern in this video that was suggested to me by a follower. So thank you, Cozy Hobbies Shell, for this pattern here, the Pocket Seal by Vanilla Gurumi. Here is the smallest one. I think this is the first time in the video that I'm starting with the smallest one, but he's really cute, little pocket seal. I use this yarn that's a little bit of a like ombre transition, so his tail is like white and then we've got like this transition lighter gray happening, which is really cool. But there's that first seal, and then we've got the middle of the road size. The face shape, you will notice, is a little bit different just because I started implementing a little bit of a cheat code, if you will, to make this pattern a little bit faster of a make for me, and I will talk about that later. But anyway, here is the final seal. As you can see, obviously this one is also a little bit of a variant from the original pattern, but I think it also looks cuter, not only being a quicker make doing it the way that I did as well. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So starting with the alterations that I made to the pattern to make it lower sew, I think that the snout could just be crocheted into the body by creating 6 single crochets and a magic ring to start, and then you would create another round of 6 single crochets, and then you could increase so that in the next round you would have 8 single crochets, which is where you start at the beginning of the pattern if you're just starting from the body section. So here is what I did just so that it's a little bit clearer. I also think that round 2 here that I wrote on the screen, as you can see it, is probably not necessary if you don't want the snout to be like as pronounced and as long as mine are. But anyway, I think that helped shave a little bit of time off as well to make it a little bit faster of a make. The other area in the pattern that I thought could be lower sew or just like a little bit easier to create was if you could connect the tail differently to itself so that you don't have to sew the 2 pieces together. It would make it a little bit faster of a make. And the way that I did this in my smallest and largest plushies were the same way that you would typically connect legs on an amigurumi plushie. I kind of did that kind of thing where you finish off the first piece, and then after you make the second piece, I just crocheted directly into the first piece, and then I did 1 round together to go around both pieces so that they were one continuous piece, and then after that I fastened off and sewed them to the body. That saved me a lot of time as well, so I didn't have to worry about sewing and having things look a little bit wrong as well. Then finally, I noticed some vague instructions, specifically that the repeats weren't written consistently in the same format throughout the whole pattern. Starting in round 1 of the body, the repeat is written like this: 8 single crochet and a magic ring. And then in round 2, it's written like this: increase times 8. And then in round 5, it's written different again, where it says 1 single crochet in each stitch. This isn't a huge deal, but I think consistency in how you're writing different instructions will make it easier to follow and will eliminate any possible confusion for the person making your pattern for the first time. Specifically because if you write, for example, 8 single crochet and that's it, that's all you have in the round, and then later in the pattern you say like maybe 1 single crochet in every stitch, those could mean 2 different things to somebody. So for example, in the first circumstance where you're saying like 8 single crochet, maybe somebody can misunderstand that as there's 8 single crochet in 1 stitch, whereas later in the pattern you have it written 1 single crochet in every stitch. Maybe they'll come back to that first round and think, did I do that wrong? Is it supposed to be 8 single crochet in just like 1 spot in the pattern, or was I supposed to do each of those 8 single crochets in a different stitch? You see where I'm coming from? That could be a little bit confusing. It's also obvious to a lot of people who have been crocheting for a long time that those are supposed to mean the same thing, just written differently, but for an absolute beginner working on this for the first time, that could be really confusing to them, and they'd be like, why is it written differently? Am I supposed to be doing something differently in different areas in the pattern? So that's why I pointed out. So overall, I think this pattern is really cute and it's a quick make. I just think it could be improved so that it was lower sew, and also it would just like be easier to make for markets if it was lower sew. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me as well, but definitely let me know if you prefer how I made my seals like face from the snout to the body, or if you prefer it so that it's like more flat like this one. This is how the designer intended it to look. So let me know in the comment section. but I would rate this pattern 3.5 stars out of 5. Next up, I have a pattern suggested to me by Lori Yarn Art, and it is the Chonky Minion. And actually, this is another pattern that was created by Vanilla Gurumi, so we have two back-to-back, actually, I think. So I thought that was really funny because the pattern, like, cover photos look really different in style and everything, so I was not expecting it to be the same pattern designer when I picked these out. But anyway, here is the middle of the road size one, really cute, really obvious that it's supposed to be a minion. And then we have the smallest size, a little bit more like round overall. It almost looks like there's like not as many rounds in just like the non-increase or decrease rounds. It just kind of looks a little bit more circular rather than like bean shaped like the first one. And then we have the largest size one, and obviously we have like the opposite problem where it just looks even longer, and that's just because of that coning thing I was talking about earlier. But anyway, really cute. I really enjoyed making these, and I think it's really obvious that it's supposed to be a minion. The first thing that I noticed was an error in the pattern in round 13. I'm not sure what it is, but I suspect that there needs to be more blue stitches between the leg bobbles. What I did was this: I made 2 single crochets, then a decrease, and I repeated that 2 times. And then after that, I made 1 single crochet, and then I did the bobble, and then I did 2 single crochet, a decrease, and then 2 more single crochet, another bobble, and then I decreased, did 2 single crochet, and then I made 2 decreases. And that was the only way I was able to get that stitch count in that row correct, as well as getting those bobbles in the right location. I also thought it was really funny that this pattern suggested that there was a no-sew option, but the no-sew option was just to glue the eye on instead of sewing it on. And I don't think that makes a lot of sense, specifically because if your pattern is claiming to be no-sew, I don't expect to have to be gluing pieces on. I think you should just be like crocheting pieces on, and I think that's what most people expect when they say no-sew, so I thought that was a little bit misleading. But overall, it's a really cute pattern, and I would rate it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have another follower suggested pattern from Crystal Clear Stitches, and this is a pattern by Happy Little Bina. It is the mini cat loaf pattern, really cute. I was expecting these cats to have like little bobble legs, but it turns out they don't. They're really just like little loaves, but really cute. Here's the medium-sized one. Looks really pretty much exactly like what the pattern designer shows you in the pictures, which is also always awesome whenever it comes out looking almost exactly like the pattern designer's photos. Then we have the largest one. I ended up doing like a little pink nose on this one because I didn't want the nose and the whiskers to be the same color, and I think I like that a lot more than just like the single color. Then we've got the smallest one in worsted weight yarn, and this one is really cute. Probably not keychainable, but you really could if you really wanted like a chunkier, like slightly larger keychain, I guess. My only note about the pattern is that it doesn't tell you to fasten off or sew closed any of the pieces. I wasn't seeing that note a lot, so it was kind of just assumed that you were supposed to do that. Other than that, the pattern is super cute and detailed. There's lots of work in progress photos, and there are also annotations on the photos that show you what you should do in certain steps, which I loved. So I would rate this pattern 4.5 stars out of 5. The next pattern is actually a pattern that I was a little bit surprised about because I thought it was like a free pattern on Instagram, but it turns out it's a free pattern on somebody's Patreon, and on Instagram you're supposed to like comment in the section under the pattern photo that says free pattern and tell the designer like, hey, I would like the free pattern, and then she shoots you a link to where to get it for free. So I thought that was really interesting, but it is the butterfly pattern by Amigurumi Toys. Here is how it turned out. Really cute, really adorable, especially with those offset safety eyes. I think that if you're doing just plain black safety eyes, you're probably not going to get as cute as this is, unfortunately. So that is something to keep in mind if you're making it yourself. I know sometimes black safety eyes don't really add anything, but sometimes they're just like, they're not the safety eye you should use to make something, because sometimes it's like kind of plain like this is, and it elevates it to another level, which is really important. So anyway, that is the medium-sized one. And then we've got the large size one, really cute. Chose a different shade combination here. So we've got the pink and then the blue. And then for the smallest one, I wanted to do a different color combination here. So instead of just doing like different shades of the same color, I chose purple and green, and I think he looks really cute. Probably keychain size, maybe a little bit chunky of a keychain, but I think somebody would get him as a keychain, so that's really cool. I don't have any notes about this pattern. I thought it was really detailed and easy to follow. There were diagrams, lots of work in progress photos, and just everything that I love about a really, really well written pattern. So I would give this pattern 5 stars out of 5. The final pattern that I crocheted for this video is actually a follower pattern that got sent to me last minute while I was working on all of the different patterns for this video. So I ended up crocheting it before I was finished like crocheting everything. So don't worry if you thought it was like super last minute. It wasn't super last minute. I just had already chosen everything. But I was really glad that she sent me this pattern because I was looking for a good pattern for this thing in particular, because I'm thinking about restocking these in particular that I already have in my inventory, but in like plush chenille yarn instead of worsted weight yarn. So it is the Low Sew Easy Pumpkin by Hannah's Dream Shop. So here is the medium-sized one, really, really cute, really easy and simple pattern to follow. Then we've got the smallest one in worsted weight yarn, really cute. And then I ended up making one in green because I thought that would be really cool, because sometimes you see like green pumpkins and I'm always like, oh my gosh, that looks so cool. So anyway, here's how that one looks, really cute. And this one is in ombre yarn, so at the very top we have like a little bit of a color transition there. I actually did not have any notes about this pattern. It was really quick and easy to make, really easy to understand and follow all of the steps involved in the pattern, so I would rate it 5 stars out of 5. So great job, Hannah. But anyway, guys, that was the last pattern that I reviewed for this video. Hopefully you found a new market make that you can prep for this fall season, and if you did, let me know which one you're going to try out or which ones you're going to try out in the comment section. I always love to hear what you guys liked the most, what stood out to you. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye!